Observation was resolution analysis. They support the top of the United States federal government should pass legislation granting trade promotion authority to the President of the United States to be supported as the parameter going to be out as an act of imagination. Necessary low both teams actually debate any of the parameters and act policy and should be rejected to the affirmative has the right to find the topic reasonably through the use of parameters with the burden of proving the topic through three policy and evidence is the best criterion for the debate. Allows both teams access to predictable burdens and methods of verification for discursive implications can be evaluated through the framework of the affirmative if the methodology of the plan is flawed. The implication of the criticism must be a direct effect of plan passage. 5. Due to the fact that our words have multiplicity of meaning unless the affirmative interpretation is shown as negative in order to be accepted in order to avoid sentencing. The PMC 6 and the PMC science through competing interpretations or framework shifts and discursive implications are more immediate must be paramount over the PMC discursive errors. Observation to the background of the preserve is that this would allow the President to make trade negotiations with a simple up-down approval from Congress, but with no option for Congress to amend or filibuster these bills. The second argument is that the bills would have to be voted on within a period of 60 days max. They have 45 days in the what's it called, the committee that they're in, and then 15 days on the floor before they are forced to, vote is forced. The third argument is that this is used in the past, but granted to Bill Clinton in order to be able to negotiate the General Agreement Trade, the GATT, I forgot what it stands for, that's the plan. The United States program through an act of Congress signed by the President will pass legislation granting trade promotion authority to the President of the United States. The United States program through an act of Congress signed by the President will pass legislation granting trade promotion authority to the President of the United States. Advantage 1, the economy. They suppose the uniqueness. The first argument is that the economy is low now. The little A's, you can look at the Congressional Budget Office reports that said that a growing number of public analysts say that the United States projected growth is down to 2% from its previous at 3%, which is barely keeping pace with inflation, means that the United States economy is stagnant. The little b is that the Federal Reserve says that they're going to keep interest rates low because the economy is still very fragile right now, means that any disturbance is going to be able to collapse it. The little c is that you can look at the Gallup United States Economy Confidence Index for the week ending in February 23rd ended at a negative 15, means that the economy is going downhill right now. But second, that there is we are wanting to pass the Trans-Pacific Partnership right now and EU trade deals that would dramatically increase the amount of exports that we have with both of these countries and increase our economic engagement in general. The B point is the link. The first argument is that Obama gets the Trade Promotion Authority. The second argument is that the President is able to negotiate without political muddling, that there is no amendments that are possible to these bills, means that it can't be mired down by things being attached to them. The third argument is that these bills are as a result going to be able to be passed and signed into law very quickly. The fourth argument is that this is particularly key to agricultural deals because the timeline that agricultural deals need to get passed on need to be reflexive of the amount of production that actually happens in these industries before the food goes bad. Thus, the C support of the impacts of the first argument is that we are going to lead to an increased number of exports of not only goods made in the United States but also the agricultural goods of the United States, because we're going to be able to more directly impact or more directly change the laws to be able to reflect the situation of the economy at present. The second argument is that we are going to be is the results of the Trans-Pacific Partnership the results of economic exports of the United States. The little a is that every $1 billion exported leads to the creation of 5,000 jobs in the United States, and the little b is that these jobs are high-wage earning jobs that are 13 to 8% higher than the national average, means that we are providing greater economic opportunity for these individuals. The little c is that the current agreements support 46% of all of our exports, proves that our agreements are key to being able to actualize our exports. The third argument under the impacts is that we lead to the recovery of the United States, which is going to resolve the employment problem and put thousands of individuals to work, means that we're giving them the opportunity to be able to provide for themselves and shore up their economic futures. You can look at the recent long-term unemployment report that shows that long-term unemployment in the United States is at 200,000, which is dramatically higher than we have seen in the past. There's a reason why we uniquely need to be addressing this right now, because individuals have been for so long out of jobs that these individuals are running out of the last bits of safety net that they have access to, means that these individuals are on number 4 in a system of cyclical poverty where they don't have the ability to get out right now because there isn't the actual creation of jobs in the United States, and that this is a form of structural violence for these individuals, that when they don't have access to employment they necessarily have an inability to be able to provide for themselves, and that decreases their quality of life and their access to health care, which leads to an increased propensity for disease spread, means that these individuals can necessarily be at the winds or at risk of dramatic disease spread, and as a result die out quicker. You happy with Advantage 2, U.S. hedge. The ace of point is the uniqueness. The first argument is that hedge low right now. The little a's, you can look to correctional stalling of important bills with other countries, and the little b is that you can look to U.S. imports, which are down 0.7% last month, means that the United States is engaging economically with other countries less. The little c is that you can look to the debt of the United States, which is at $70.4 trillion, means that the United States is actually in a pretty weak economic point at present. The second argument is that trade is key to hegemony. The little a is that trade leads to a reduction in conflict because we have little b an aligned interest with these other countries, because when we are pursuing the same economic interests, we are pretty seriously disincentivized to do anything that would harm the other. The little c is that this leads to that conflict is inevitable right now. You can look to competition between the United States and China specifically as a potential flashpoint for conflict in the future, either through the Senkaku Daiu or the Scarborough Shoals, which have been pretty contentious lately. The Beast point is linked. The first argument is that there is an increase in exports as a result of the passage of plan, and the second argument is that economic engagement with more countries, we are going to economically engage with more countries. Specifically, you look to China, who wants to sign on to the Trans-Pacific Partnership as a way that we are going to economically engage with a country that we are competing with right now. The season point of the impacts, the first argument is that low U.S. hedge is the cause of arm races, at the point at which there is a multipolar world, and we necessarily feel the need to be able to arm ourselves against each other so that we can protect our economic interests against these other nations. The little two is that this leads to things like land grabs. You can look specifically to Russia and Crimea, or you can look to China reaching out for the Senkaku Daiu Islands or the Scarborough Shoals as instances of economic engagement leading to land grabs. The third argument is that this is going to be a check for aggression, that is going to be able to check back against the great power wars, because this is key to reducing regional conflict, at the point at which the United States and China have higher aligned economic interests. They are probably less likely to do things that are going to piss each other off and risk going to war with one another. Is a reason why economic engagement is going to be key to resolving U.S. hegemony, to be able to check back against these regional conflicts that can lead to the death of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of individuals, is a reason why we need to pass the affirmative.
The order is 2 off and at the base.
Are either of these criticisms?
Nope.
Yay, it's being the topic.
Will any the first sheet on case?
Probably not.
So just starting at the end.
You don't want to disagree with that,
Right? Yep. First off is the DISAD. The ace point is to the first order is the countries involved in the TPP don't currently have strong patent systems. The ace point here is that in New Zealand there are a large amount of generic drugs because they don't recognize patent rights to the extent that the United States does. But the ace point here is that another example of this is Vietnam, which also has the exact same thing as New Zealand, which are two reasons why with two appears in countries that do not have as strong patent rights as the United States and the TPP right now. The season point here is that the United States has the strongest patent rights in the entirety of the world. There are 2 million new patents that are approved in the last 2 years alone, and the patent time is 20 years until generic drugs can actually be made. And the season point here is that India is also part of the TPP and does not have the same patent protections as the United States, which puts it in the same category as New Zealand and Vietnam. The season point is links. Our first argument here is that the plan will cause the United States to enable the imposition of IP provisions similar to United States patent rights on other countries that are signatories to the TPP that you claim to solve for. The affirmative, the ace point here is that it is empirically proven with the Korean free trade agreements that we force them to strengthen their IP protection. This will necessarily be happening because this is also at the forefront of the discussion for the TPP. The piece point here is also the current United States proposal to the TPP has IP provisions that go far beyond the Korean FTA, which will necessarily cripple the economy. The piece point here is the TPP and any other kind of United States free trade agreements require the patents to be granted for any kind of new form, use, or method of known products, which is key for drugs, because drugs don't actually, under this interpretation, need any kind of efficacy for new patents, which means that they can necessarily just change like the packaging of a drug in order to get another 20 years on the patenting. The second argument here is that the United States, as a result of the plan, will allow for its IP provisions to be included in the TPP. The ace point here is that you can quantify the solvency arguments as to why IP will necessarily be, as to why the plan will allow for the negotiation of certain provisions. And the President Obama has said that the TPA is key to negotiating the TPP. For example, IP provisions at the forefront of the agenda, which means that free trade and this in general will be impacted by the United States' attempts to impose IP provisions onto other countries through the IPP. Through the TPP. The season point here is that the drug industry wants to have strong patent protections because of making big money in India, which means that in a world of the affirmative, that necessarily will allow for the imposition of strong patent protections into other countries. The internal links. The first argument here is that access to strong patent rights means that there will be no access to generic medicines, which means that strong patent right impositions is going to be a bad thing. The ACE argument here is that pharmaceutical companies show that patents on only the pharmaceutical companies can have patents on any kind of new change in a drug, even if there's no increase in efficacy, which means that this will necessarily be able to continue to be self-replicating. But the ACE point here is also that this is going to be a worldwide patent system under the TPP, which means that in a world where Obama is going to be able to negotiate the TPP and also additionally push for the imposition of strong patent rights, which we have said that if he wants to do that necessarily means that making small changes for a patent also means that you prevent the introduction of generics even for other countries. But the second argument is also that strong patent rights in other countries are not key because the domestic strong patent rights in other countries are not key to the United States domestic pharmaceutical companies because a lot of economic analysts have predicted that the domestic market is strong enough in order to have that, which means that we are also able to solve back for all of your business confidence arguments on the impact level. The first argument is that we allow for the access of affordable, generic, and affordable drugs, which is key to public health only in the world of the affirmative when you pass the plan is that does generic and affordable drugs be an impossibility for people in other countries, specifically in India, New Zealand, and Vietnam. Here, the Indians key empiric, they have no money to buy from a monopoly that functionally has a monopoly on the generation of new drugs. But the beast point here is that access to key HIV drugs and also antivirals are things that thousands and thousands of people depend on in these countries, specifically in India. But the disease point is also that disease spread in close proximities results in a massive amount of death, which means we're controlling a massive structural impact in a world where the TPP passes with the IP provisions. That will mean that the inability for other countries to generate their own generics because of the strong patent rights that continue to replicate themselves every single 20 years means that they can either buy from the monopoly or not have drugs at all. The second argument here is cycles of dependence means that organic growth of the medicinal sector is impossible in other countries, which means that they always have to buy from the United States, which always will result in things like colonialism. Template. The United States federal government, through an act of Congress signed by the President, will pass legislation granting trade promotion authority to the President of the United States except as to intellectual property rights relating to pharmaceutical and medical discovery. The USFG, through an act of Congress signed by the President, will pass legislation granting trade promotion authority to the President of the United States except as to intellectual property rights relating to pharmaceutical and medical discovery. I'll get to you again. The competition under here is that we're going to be functionally competitive because we're going to be winning. That the counterplan necessarily will not be biting into the disad that has to do with the intellectual property imposition that will allow for medicinal discovery to not be a possibility in other countries, but additionally the solvency, the 100% of the affirmative is not predicated on intellectual property. There's no way that you can actually spin this because a lot of analysts have specifically said that intellectual property relating to relating to drug and medicinal discovery is not the backbone of the economy, nor is it the backbone of business confidence, which is research why we are able to solve 100% of the case while avoiding this ad. Here, question.
Can I just ask a copy?
Yeah, unconditional. I'll write you a copy. Brian, can you write it? On case. First, they say that the economy is slow down, but that is just not a true argument. Our first response to this is that you prefer leading indicators over lagging indicators because leading indicators are the only way that you can actually predict the health of the economy in the future, whereas lagging indicators only tell you what happened in the past, which means all of your arguments about how the United States GDP has been going down, or things like consumer confidence, these are all the things that are lagging indicators, but leading indicators are things like manufacturing. So the ACE component here is that the leading economic index, which is an aggregate of all leading indicators, has been up 0.2% since March, which means that we are also accessing the most recent leading economic indicator. But the ACE component right here is the trucking and manufacturing has been also going up from December 2013, probably a reason as to why our sectors are always going to be able to keep up. But the 6th point here is that housing demand, the construction of new housing has also been up 2 ticks since the last year in summer 2013, which is a reason as to why our control of the economic, whether or not the economy is high, the status quo is absolutely whomping. Your evidence additionally, the decent point here is the consumer debt to leverage ratio, which is basically how much debt you have versus how much you can actually spend, has gone down from 1.3 to 1.15, which is reasons why people are necessarily going to be able to increase their amount of retail spending, probably a reason why we are controlling the impact on, we are controlling the uniqueness on whether or not the economy is high. Additionally, you extend the argument that says the Federal Reserve is keeping the interest rates low. This is actually a good thing because it allows for fiscal policy and the amount of new investments to actually increase. I don't see necessarily as to why this means that the economy is bad. Keeping the interest rates low means that people are necessarily going to be incentivized to invest more, which is only a reason why the economy is high. Instead of additional links argument, you make the argument that this is going to be able to increase the amount of business confidence. But the first argument is turned. Business confidence is necessarily going to be going down in the world plan because people do not know whether or not they're going to be able to sell things. Because people do not know whether or not they're going to be able. People do not know whether or not they're going to be able to sell things under the TPP. Additionally, on the impact level, you say that you're going to be able to increase the amount of exports, but our argument is that exports are higher than status quo, which means that all of the jobs that you claim that you would be able to solve for are necessarily already solved for in the world. You can go ahead, hedge. On the hedge argument, you first make the argument that the United States economy is stalling and our imports are going down. Additionally, this is another argument that I do not understand as a reason why you read this as your uniqueness. You can extend the argument that imports are down in the status quo. Imports are bad for our GDP. Within the calculation, the amount of our capital outflow is net exports minus imports, which is the reason as to why imports are bad for GDP, but you can also cross-apply the arguments that the United States exports are actually high in the status quo, which means that exports being high is the reason as to why we're actually engaging with other countries. We're just not dependent on them. It's just a question of whether or not they are dependent on us or whether or not we are dependent on them. Imports mean that we're dependent on them. Exports mean that they're dependent on us. Additionally, the second argument here is that our marginal cost for new manufacturing is actually lower by 80% in Japan, which is the reason why our exports are absolutely high, which means that we're still engaging with other countries. And since our internal link is just engagement, we are always going to be able to say that additionally, not only is hedge high, not only is our engagement high, it's also better than just imports because our exports will necessarily offer a better form of engagement where they depend on us. Additionally, on the link level, the first responses term here argument is that economic engagement is going to be higher for the pig because they're going to be able to have the material preconditions for engaging with the United States, which is not having a public health crisis. Only in a world of the affirmative do they have a public health crisis, which is a prior question to whether or not they're going to be able to engage with the United States. Additionally, on land grabs, there's no reasons why the United States hegemony is going to be so uniquely low as the land grabs happening. Additionally, it has not happened yet in hegemony side.
Yeah, this counter plan, new sheet. Case, I'm just gonna go to management next.
Thank you.
Everybody ready?
Yeah. Just like kind of new sheet in case.
Just counter plan, new sheet, case.
Okay.
All this effort structure is not deep, so once we are arguing that these systems are moving farther away from patent system status quo. Even India's next level here, the Supreme Court just ruled that compulsory licensing is an acceptable form and required that that medical companies provide these patents for the usage of generic drugs. This argument necessarily means that these countries are moving away from the patent system status quo, and means there's no reason why the TPP is going to require these new instances. The second argument here is no link that there's no ability for the IP to be included. Our argument here is that if these countries do not want these forms of patent protection as there's no reason why the United States would be able to require these to be included. Our argument here is that especially for instances of generic drugs, the United States not going to be able to support an argument that these IP protections have to be included because there's no link to disadvantage. Additionally, the third argument here is that we can turn this by saying that provide for additional negotiation allows for the decrease of the power of these these drug companies. Our argument here is that especially Obama has been promoting things like access to healthcare through the Affordable Care Act necessarily means they help them promote increased access to healthcare, especially generic drugs, means that probably by providing better negotiating authority through the plan, it probably resolves any question of these access to trade promotion. Yeah.
This takes away the power of lobbyists because no longer can Congress stall this out. It's forced to
excellent point. Additionally, the next argument is turned that we resolve the power of lobbyists. The cause for these inclusions of IP protections. Our argument here is that the lobbyists lobby Congress on these issues and require these forms of IP protections to be included, where the president necessarily doesn't want these means only by striking these issues through as we talk about insolvency can prevent the inclusion of these forms of provisions that lead to worse IP protection. Now, additionally, on the internal link level. On the internal link level, they make arguments about how we are going to be forcing our patent system on the rest of the country. Our argument is that there's no reasons why we're going to be forcing this. Our argument here is that especially even if this is included in the Trans-Pacific Partnership, there's no reasons why some other countries are going to follow. But additionally, you could look at the fact that the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade is probably already not meets this scenario by requiring IP protection. Necessarily means there's no uniqueness to this scenario. Additionally, next argument here is the no internal link that the black market probably solves this. Our argument here is that things like black market and under the table drug probably resolve this question of generic drugs and allow individuals access to the drugs because there's no internal link in the scenario. Additionally, the impact that you're going for is access to drugs is key to prevent health crises. Our argument here is that the case probably solves this. Our argument is that an increase in wages, especially by an increase by 13 to 18%, as the case tells you, means that they probably buy these brand name drugs, especially when this is a mutually beneficial partnership to increase wages across the world, means that there's no need for generic drugs anymore. It means the case probably resolves this question.
Yeah, they talk about colonialism at the bottom of this scenario. We argue that there's no reasons why they don't explicate any warrants on this. Additionally, second said they don't impact this scenario. This means they're not going to be requiring that. Additionally, we say that they say that the implement. Additionally, next argument here is there's no impact in this scenario. They argue that they're not going to be requiring an increase in patent protection. But our argument here is that this is
going to take a long time for these forms of domestic law to be required. And this means that it's probably a long time for your scenarios, and that the system means that you should be preferring the system of poverty that's resolved through the affirmative plan. The affirmative plan by the increases in the economy means that only cases able to resolve these questions.
Good. Yep. Capital. And actually, I want to flip this and do the new sheet first. A is the interpretation. The negative is not allowed access to counterclaims that include the plan text when there's only one topical affirmative. The negative is not allowed counterclaims that include the plan text when there's only one topical affirmative. Basically, I'll repeat it again. Okay. Negative is not allowed access to counterclaims that include the plan text when there's only one topical affirmative.
These violations, they read a pick and skim us out of our ground. The same as first is use the PMC. Our argument here is that there's no way for us to generate any disadvantage to the counterclaim because of the fact that we'd never be able to argue why our case is why we can't leverage our case as a disadvantage to the counterclaim because it includes our case. We don't get any access to ground. Additionally, there's no addition. The second argument here is predictability that there are an infinite number of things that they can pick out of, and there's no way for us to be able to predict this. The predictability is the key internal links to fairness in education because they will always be better warranted on these questions. We'll never be able to get access to the debate. The third argument here is education, that we aren't learning about the heart of the topic, but rather only a specific subset, and it prevents us from actually getting this access to the breadth of education. We argue the breadth is better than depth because of the fact that this is necessary for us to be able to understand and apply information to a large set of issues as opposed to just one specific issue. These should be referred to the breadth of education. D are the burden first to combat equity only where both seems to have access to ground, both seems to be show up to debate. Second is education. The purpose of debate is increased education. After this, fewer people will join debate. Third is that you should evaluate theory through competing interpretations with each other. Interpretations superior through the standards debate. You should go to rectify these issues of fairness in education. And four is that this justifies permanent counterclaim. When we lose access to any other offense against the counterclaim, this justifies doing permanent counterclaim to show that it is not competitive. Counterclaim. First argument is permanent counterclaim. Permanent counterclaim. First, we argue that this is not mutually exclusive. It is not for disputing the affirmative advocacy, but only is adding an exception. Our argument here is that this is not mutually exclusive, and only it adds an exception. Additionally, second, say that this results the link to the disadvantage that you or that solves any risk of the case. Additionally, the next argument here is the solvency deficit that you do not solve that for advantage. One, our argument here is that especially the drug industry accounts for a large amount of the economy, and that when you are preventing access to this probably means that there's these jobs aren't going to be created, especially within the drug industry. The third argument here is no solvency, that without the access for these IP protections, it means that other countries are going. That Congress probably won't pass it in the first place. Our argument here is that even though fast track trade happens, Congress will still vote it down. Without these IP protections, it means that none of the trade agreements are going to happen. It means that you don't get any access to solvency. Additionally, the fourth argument here is the disadvantage of the counterclaim that.
To set up the counterclaim software. We had massive software disputes over intellectual property. You don't have to resolve the counterclaim.
Good case. On the economy advantage.
They make a bunch of these arguments about leading indicators, but none of these are actually responsive to the overall the scenario that we're talking about. You should be referring our analysis on the actual GDP and the indicators that are reserved to show a better indication of the economy. All of our arguments about manufacturing do not apply in instances, especially when things like exports affect more of the overall growth than individual things like manufacturing. Means that the probably result, and that means that your indicators are not effective. Additionally, how much you prefer our analysis, especially on the Federal Reserve. I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to get you. You should prefer an analysis, especially on the Federal Reserve, that says that you make this argument that allows for investment. No, it actually shows the economy is still weak. The Federal Reserve that is trying to show an increase in the economy is still keeping interest rates growth, and shows that the economy is still weak as a whole. Because all of your analysis, especially on investment manufacturing, are not applicable. Additionally, you make this trend that says it's going to decrease business confidence because businesses don't know what to sell. Or you should prefer our analysis that says that businesses will be more confident as a result of this because of the fact that it shows that they will increase their ability to export their products overseas. And so it means that they get better assets. Additionally, it's not going to limit them. It's only new opportunities, new markets for businesses means the case. It's all back to the same fact. Additionally, you make the argument that exports are high now. We say there are unemployment arguments showing that unemployment is still very high in status quo, especially long-term unemployment, and only that from providing for new exports to increase jobs. The only plan to be able to solve this. I want you to go ahead and hegemony debate.
I can pick out of this. I don't have answer to time answer at all. I want you to extend across the hedge is high in the status quo. There's no access to this. Additionally, the term that you make about public health crisis is not applicable when we argue when we're already having these engagements, and there's no reason to why we stop suggesting.
So, where is the
Sorry, can you
speak up just a little bit, just because this thing?
The order is going to be theory debate, and then it's going to be the counter plan. We just said. And then it'll be the case line advantage.
Sorry, so theory counterpoint does have advantage.
Counter-interpretation of when the resolution indicates the United States federal government should pass legislation to the Neg is entitled to one plan includes counter-plan and counter-interpretation. When the resolution says to pass the United States federal government should pass legislation to the negative is entitled to one plan includes counter-plan. Weak interpretation of the resolution says the United States federal government should pass legislation to grant the president specific authority in the context of these trade policies are coupled. That's the first argument may actually increase the amount of specific ground this issue because they would actually increase the ground is actually allows them for stabilization which means French should next strategy. Also, increasing the amount of education to actually talk about these specifics of a policy breadth is always going to be non-unique, so we use that. It's absolutely critical in the context of policy debate. Also, the next argument also incentivizes atomic research in the world. We're not allowed to plan. Plan inclusive counterplans. We actually never actually allow for atomic research, which means we refer to education and constantly around. Also, the next argument is plan inclusive counterplans is critical for preserving negative ground because breadth is for defending reprehensible things such as impact terms. You think such as racist, which means it's always going to be critical. Also, the next argument is absolutely critical to liberal policy making in the context of within the context of the debate around they the arguments for why this act screws the entire ground, but our argument here is that negative flexibility is key, especially in a world with pass the resolution to the affirmative, a lot of flexibility to interpret types of policy, which means that it's critical for checking out for extra topic and context. They make the argument why it's fully aggressive. The first response is not infinitely aggressive because it's checked back by the literature from the context of the argument, but also the issue besides the net that checks back the entirety of your offense and also the fact that you actually able to write create a context, even the constraints of resolution needs to or not. It will solve the same arguments why they actually need to create a topic across the line. The depth arguments would actually increase the amount of depth in the topic area discussion. They make the arguments why breadth is specifically better. You can see the analysis of where breadth is actually not using which means you're always going to default to depth. Yeah.
Also, there's not only one topical app.
Yeah, but there's also not one topical app. That's our interpretation. They can parameterize to specific types of trade policy, which means making flexibility is critical.
That's on the framework at the top.
Yeah, that's on the framework argument at the top, which means they make arguments by fairness education. We control the link to fairness education world where we actually increase the ground, also increase the amount of education, be the topic specific research. Also, need interpretation race to about the fundamental interpretation. You should always value reasonability. Art says that reasonability means that you should, which means they have to win every single standard. Also, they say this actually justifies permutation in the counterplan. We will get to that. It does not justify permutation in the counterplan. Let's go to the counterplan debate. They make the arguments for permutation in the counterplan arms, and this is the individual act of severance. They make the arguments for why we're at an exceptional plan not true because it actually allows them to sever for the ability of Obama to actually make specific legislation within the context of pharmaceutical policies in the plan text. He is able to do that, but only in a world of counter context. He's no longer able to, which means it's severing out of Obama's authority to do so. The first argument is usually interpretation. First, it's used the ground actually is used ground habitually, which means you're able to always sever out of links to dispatch, which means there are always restricting sites to be a moving target because they're able to sever out links to strategy, which means the ability of the negative to make strategies can lead you, especially in a world where they get P-march collapse nexus to be reciprocity. The reciprocity group can actually stable text, especially when reading positions unconditionally, which means the ability for the business to sever is actually used because they've heard she speaks first and last and the entire debate, which means there's no reason they can solve on-field terms for profit. They make the arguments why we choose to advance the arguments and sever expectation above the say. It resolves the links to this is the proof of the abuse of the severance permutation, which is why you can both go down also law. Also make the arguments why they don't solve advantage one because the pharmaceutical industry is key. The first argument is they can see the analysis which their way to their plan to operationalize action destroys markets in other worlds, which means the United States pharmaceutical industry is not able to grow these markets, which means we're actually able to resolve the entire advantage of one because we solve this differential. The next argument here is there's also the arguments that we are able to solve the entire advantage of one because we are able to solve the entirely disadvantage because they're only making arguments to why the economies in general is decreasing. They're not making specific arguments to pharmaceutical companies, which means in a world where actually will do almost the entirety of the plan except for pharmaceutical companies, the perception of the business conflicts that are being able to increase the aggregate income stimulated demand, which means we're able to solve. They make the arguments for why Congress is not able to pass our arguments, and that is your own internal link lobbying arguments that you make, which means the counterplan is actually able to resolve this itself.
Yeah, also the context destroys the markets, at least generic companies in
Yeah.
U.S. itself.
Also the plant text destroys the markets. At least in the world counter plant, they can sell specific generic drugs, which means that their specific accuracy means that they're actually unable to solve advanced levels of deception. They make the arms white, enemies moving away in status quo, the enemies moving to status quo. The first argument is this is only unique status quo because in the world war, the certain legislations that exist in status quo, only the fact that signing these agreements means that other countries will be forced to actually comply with these bans. Argument here that specifically these countries want the TPP so bad they're willing to ignore these pharmaceutical provisions because it's a massive aggregate of the economy, which means that this small-scale issue is not a larger scheme issue, which means countries will actually want it. They make the arguments to why there is absolutely no link, but they can see the analysis where in the world where they can see the analysis where the U.S. pharmaceutical industries have leverage in the status quo, which means there is only a risk that U.S. pharmaceutical companies want to expand in other markets. This is actually clearly verified in the way in which companies such as Bayer have expanded in other countries. They make the argument turn. They're actually able to increase the stability of the market. They make the arguments as to turn that they increase the stability of the market. The first argument is they have classifying the argument that these pharmaceutical companies will specifically push for it, and the companies will actually accept it because they actually want the deals with the TPP actually more than the actual potential disadvantage to the counterfeit. They also make the arguments why they want access to status quo. They can see the analysis where these pharmaceutical companies are specifically driven by interest to enforce legislation, which means its enforcement is absolutely that exists in status quo. Also, the argument below is that Obama is actually specifically tied with these pharmaceutical companies because they donated hundreds of $1 billion to a re-election campaign, which is why the Obama administration will all be able to pass this through. They make the arguments to why lobbies, which means that lobbies will increase the provision with that. The exception actually allow for the exception actually will resolve this link because the pharmaceutical companies will still be able to push for the status quo, force it because they have critical actions. They make the arguments why there's no following. The arguments here is that the pharmaceutical companies have resources and they want to protect the profit, which is an absolute incentive. They don't force. That's the reason why they are pushing for legislation in the status quo. They make the arguments why this would resolve ID trade with the link scenario still true, which means there's always going to be an imposition that exists. They make the arguments why black markets are solved. The first argument, black markets are unable to solve because the large prices are very expensive in the status quo. Also, there is no mass distribution, which means supply flow, which means supply side demand is always going to be inhibited. Also regular people don't have access to the black market and there's a limited supply, which means they are unable to solve which means they're unable to solve. They make the arguments why there's a long-term impact that exists in the status quo. But our argument here is that specific drugs like HIV and retroviral medications are extremely expensive. The impact would happen immediately. We save life right now. Our argument is the perception of being sued actually collapse these pharmaceutical industries immediately, which means we have an immediate time for this to happen, which means it's something they do are not able, which means there's something that they're not able to resolve.
Yeah, the wages will increase, not enough for like a monopoly.
They say that wages increase, but the first argument is not enough for the monopoly to happen. Specifically, we are reading arguments, so not enough for the monopoly to happen. Also, they can see the analysis really tell the industry's internally. There's no reason why they can afford $5,000 retroviral medications when you have a marginal increase in trade, especially these are the most impoverished population that exists in South Dakota. They can see the slew of artists indicates that you need to go the other direction. They make the artists why it's not effective growth. You can see that we're manufacturing and other housing indicators are specific up, which means economic collapse is absolutely not inevitable. Additionally, the United States economy is having jobs, which means it's always going to be a leading type of indicator, which they're not growing. These things are lagging indicator, which means they're not able to solve. You can send each other. They make the artists why business confidence is cheap, but they can see the specific analysis for destroyed markets in other countries, which means to destroy the ability of the United States. Also, the instabilities, the prerequisite to agri-growth, because even if you have agri-growth, you have no ability to actually predict the market, which is the interlink to actually financial planning, which outweighs any risk of your arms, which means you're not actually able to solve.
The order is going to be in the order that Ryan went. Theory, town plan, it says management. Ready? The first reason is why the affirmative has no ground of the third position is because there's not only one topical affirmative. Remember where Ryan specifically extends their observation at the beginning of the framework where it says the affirmative has the ability to parametricize, which means that you can grant the president, the trade promotion authority, a specific instance, which would be an instance of parametricization, which means that there's not only one topical affirmative. This is not which to accept Ryan's counterinterpretation that says when you are able to pass legislation in order to do something, that is a reason as why the negative would be able to get a pick because you can necessarily do a lot of different plans, which means that we are necessarily going to be able to meet our counterinterpretation because there's not only one case. Additionally, I want you to extend the argument that since breath is non-unique, that defend necessarily going to be key and crucial because you need to be able to defend 100% of the plan, otherwise you're going to be able to avoid the education that would be necessary that comes from the clash, where you have to defend the entire plan. Additionally, I want to extend the argument that it incentivizes top research and preserves negative parameters, negative flexibility is key in a world where we do not only have the top goal for negative flexibility is also going to be key in a world where we do not have to defend reprehensible things like racism ban and having to turn that by reading something that has nothing to do with that, which means that we are always going to be able to have a better internally on that. Additionally, I want to extend the argument that predictability is controlled by the top literature, which means that the world where we are in the top literature, we're always going to be able to solve for your predictability arguments, which means that you can still leverage your case because you are always going to be able to generate offense, at least on the idea of pharmaceuticals. Additionally, I want to extend, go to the argument on reasonability. Reasonability means that they have to justify their 100% of their 100% of the they have to win 100% of the standards. And I also want you to go to the counterplan argument. This does not justify firm to the counterplan. If they are not winning the theory page, then there is no preference for firm to the counterplan over voting us down. As long as they are not winning this page, then they do not get firm to the counterplan. Also, reasons why when they read firm to the counterplan, that's actually a unique reason to vote against the affirmative. Go on to the counterplan. First argument that wants to extend firm to the counterplan is necessarily going to be severing because Ryan gives you the example of an instance where Obama making legislation on IP on medicine for other countries is going to be allowed in the world of the plan, but when you do firm to the counterplan, it is not allowed, which means that you will not give them any access to any kind of like friendly amendment counterplans. Also, firm to the counterplan is not a friendly amendment counterplan, which means that you are 100% severing from the entirety, which means that you are not answering the reciprocity arguments. Reciprocity is a prior question to anything because in a world where reciprocity is not actually engaged in by both, then there's no way that you can actually evaluate the truth of the arguments, which means that this is going to be a prior question even to their theoretical position. Additionally, they make the argument that drugs are not going to be able to be created, but our argument is pretty specific. When the plan text destroys markets, at least generic companies in the United States will be able to sell their things in other countries. For example, if you pass the TPP, when you do not have the IP provision, then that means that generic companies in the United States will be able to make things like aspirin, for example, and sell them to other countries. But when you have the IP provision, that means that only the big corporations like Bayer in the United States are going to be able to sell to other countries, which means that not only can the other countries not make their own medicine, they also can't buy from the United States companies. They can only buy from the top United States companies, which means that all the small businesses that make generic drugs are necessarily going to be lower. That's also a reason why we control the internal business confidence, because we're going to be making the argument that small companies are necessarily more important business confidence than the larger companies. Additionally, I want you to know the argument that they say that there's no solvency because Congress will pass it. This is also a reason as to why the logic of lobbying still applies. They say that Congress will not have a place in this, but they still make the lobbying argument, which means that you can cross-apply all the lobbying logic that says that in the world where that's a reason as to why lobbying is still going to be existing in the world of the status quo, pushing Obama to press for this. Go on to the dissent. On the dissent, they say the other countries are moving away from patents, but this is only uniqueness in our direction. Our argument is pretty specific. From the United States pharmaceutical industry has leveraged in the status quo. Obama has also specifically said that this is the top of his agenda, pushing for IP for medicine, which is the reason why he absolutely will do this. Additionally, there is no response to this. Also, we make the argument that Obama's tied with the pharmaceutical industry, which means they were pressuring him to do that, and they legitimize the link to pharmaceutical industries pushing Obama to do this. Additionally, they make I want to extend the argument also that there's no increased abilities because farm companies will push for, which means that only in the world of the counterplan are you going to allow for the creation of new markets. Additionally, they're going to try to make arguments the black market results. That's not true because demand is still going to be over the amount of supply, and the case is not going to be solved because wages will not increase enough to allow them to buy retroviral drugs for like $5,000. Additionally, in the economy, I want to extend the argument that we're necessarily going to be manufacturing, allowing for export markets. That is the internal link to export markets, which means that we're just controlling the uniqueness of the economy. And at the end of the debate, here's how it breaks down. We're winning arguments that there's not one topical affirmative. They say this themselves when they say they compare metricides, and our counter-interpretation examples means that there's no reason to vote on permutation through the counterplan. That's the reason to reject that.
I'm going to go the theory debate, the counterplan, the disad, advantage one.
So it's the same order as that.
Yes.
I only need UK.
Joe? Can't get it.
You can accept that we're not going for this position, but the only argument that I want to answer is that in the LOR they try to say that there's a reason to reject the team, but that never came out of the MO is probably a reason why we're never going to be buying that argument, and it's just not true. I won't go for the perm. You don't need to reject it. You have to go on the perm. The first argument that they go for is severance ban. There are a couple of reasons that I want to be able to answer. The first argument is that you don't need to evaluate this as severance because it only adds words to the text, doesn't actually remove anything from the text. It means that we are not textually severing from anything out of the PMC. The next argument that they go for is that they need access to reciprocity. However, I'm going to say that things are bad for reciprocity because the affirmative loses access to all of the advantages of the part of which the negative is able to capture them all, and we are not going to be able to generate any any offense against the pick unless we have the ability to straight turn the disadvantages. The reason why this is actually worse for reciprocity for the affirmative, but I'm not actually going for the perm, so it doesn't matter. Corey, do you want anything else here? Right, reject the argument, not the team. If I don't go for the perm, there's no reason to reject it for. On the dissent debate. My opponents make a couple of pretty damning concessions, which are the reason why the affirmative team is going to be winning the debate today, because we are not only controlling the uniqueness level, but we also have key concessions at the link level that are going to be resolving this in favor of the affirmative. Is the reason why you never need to evaluate for the counter plan in order to be able to resolve this, because if the plain text is already doing this right now, then you can vote presumption on favor of the affirmative. The first argument that I want you to extend is Corey's argument that this is entirely non-unique. The Supreme Court just said that compulsory licensing applies to generic drugs, means that these companies have to provide a cheaper generic alternative to other markets. When they don't answer this, this means that their entire scenario was just non-unique, and it doesn't matter to the debate today. But next, the argument that I want next is Corey's no-link argument that IP is not going to be included in these because countries aren't going to allow it.
The compulsory licensing argument, are you making that as a United States argument or an India argument?
I'm making this as an argument that in the United States we rule that you need a compulsory license outside of the United States.
Okay, the point of order is that the argument that you have to license to outside of the United States is a new argument. Corey's argument is that compulsory licensing means that corporations have to provide a generic alternative within the United States, not to like world international trade.
I never heard Corey say that it applied inside the United States. And considering the context of this disadvantage, I feel like it's fair to contextualize that argument to the international community.
That'll be taken into consideration.
The next argument that I want to go for is the no-link argument that IP is not going to be included in this because countries aren't going to allow these treaties if it's going to remove their generic drugs market. Means that these countries are never going to sign any legislation that's necessarily going to damage them, and so much you can extend this argument, which is particularly damning for them because the point in which they're reading these impact scenarios and saying that these impacts are so bad, this is probably a reason why the country's never going to be wanting to do this. This is a reason why this no-link scenario functions. But the next argument that I want to go for is that we're going to be able to resolve the power of lobbyists and the status quo. The only response that my opponents make is that Obama is tied to pharmaceutical companies, but at the point in which he doesn't matter anymore because he's not going to be in politics. He can't run again. Means that it doesn't matter what pharmaceutical companies want from him because he's going to be able to negotiate these trades irrespective of what pharmaceutical companies do because he no longer needs their political donations in order to get reelected. Means that this scenario doesn't matter and we still have access to the link term. When this is their only argument that we are going to be resolving the link term and the affirmative team is going to be able to resolve the issue of generic drugs. Yes, Corey?
Even if he's gotten donations, Obama's pushing for access to health care before the CARE Act groups.
Right, even if he's been, even if he needs donations, he's been pushing for affordable health care. The Affordable Care Act proved that, and he's been doing that outside of the United States through initiatives to engage other countries in more health care, specifically through programs like PEPFAR is the reason why Obama is probably going to protect other countries' access to things like antiretroviral treatments.
Point of order. All of that arguments after ACA proves within the United States is new. It's absolutely new.
You never tied this, sorry. Our arguments about lobbyists not having power were never contextualized to Obama until the member of opposition speech. The original argument was that lobbyists are no longer going to have power over Congress, and as a result that removes their influence. So when my opponents change it to lobbyists still have power over Obama, we need to get new access to that argument because they're changing the link debate that's happening.
Plus, the MG,
Under consideration.
at worst it's music.
Regardless of any of that information being new, the argument still stands that Obama is no longer going to be tied to politics. There's a reason why you don't need to evaluate this over the specific analysis of the affirmative, that we are going to be able to resolve the power of lobbyists by removing their political influence, by cutting out Congress as the middleman. The next argument that I want to extend is Corey's argument that we're not going to be able to force these countries to. Sorry, he makes that no-link argument earlier. I don't need that. We still get access to the black market arguments. Their only arguments against is that it's going to be too expensive, but if it's too expensive, the black market's not going to make any money. They're probably going to price adjust to where they're actually selling something. The next argument that they go for is that the increase in wages is not going to be able to resolve it because it's not going to be enough to get over the monopoly, but sure, Corey?
Can you actually
Go back to the counter plan?
Yes. And you extend no solitary method says that without this protection, the pharmaceutical company will not allow for these rates to pass the first place.
Right. You can extend the no solvency argument on the counter plan debate that that pharmaceutical companies are not going to allow this to pass in the first place. If this exemption happens, means that this This, combined with all of the argumentation about how pharmaceutical companies are powerful lobbyists, probably means that this is never going to be able to resolve the advantages, and that means that the counterplan never gets access to this. When only the affirmative plan has full access to the advantages, my opponents are never going to be able to outweigh through the disadvantage when their impacts are things like disease spread, which are subsumed under the advantage one debate. All right, let's go to advantage one. The only arguments that they're going for here are the non-unique about how we're using trailing economic indicators, but to the economic indicators that are actually leading economic indicators, you don't need to evaluate that. The only other argument that they go for is that this destroys markets in other countries, but at the point in which that is only contextualized to the pharmaceutical industry, you never need to be able to evaluate this against the affirmative, and the affirmative team still solves for advantage one.
Negative, and how my ballot reads is that I vote negative because without uniqueness for the advantage, a risk of the disad outweighs the solvency deficit towards the counterclaim, right? So the arguments I'm pulling through specifically, like through the MO, I at least have the argument in the MO, the first argument on advantage number one, is that you concede arguments about manufacturing. I feel like this is a lot more indicative maybe of where jobs are going, and there's not really even discussion about it in the PMR. I think your first strategy, right, is that in order for you to win the debate, I think you need to win advantage number one, or the fact that it is unique, right, because the only solvency you have is leverage against the counterclaim if you solve advantage number one. So without uniqueness for advantage number one, I don't necessarily see the ability for you to solve. However, I'm left in sort of a predicament and a disadvantage. There's a part of me that also just wants to vote on presumption for the negative. For the reason being that if the negative is winning, that Obama is like fueled by pharmaceutical companies, right? And you're winning that if there's like not IP tied in there, then other countries, or IP, or they're also winning that IP is tied to other countries, right? They won't accept those deals. Then it seems that all those deals will not be accepted in order to save the economy. And that's something, I mean, like, that maybe I'm just in my own mind right here, that maybe doesn't get played out, but I think the arguments I'm definitely pulling through, and I'm not quite so sure, like, where this Supreme Court argument is necessarily stated. I think you would need to, at least in the MG, explain it a little bit more for me, because I'm actually not certain. I almost hear that, and again, it could be my old age, the thing, I almost hear that India's Supreme Court has gone towards, and that's what, so okay, so I'm glad I'm right, I feel a little younger, so I have the argument that India's Supreme Court has said that there has to be some sort of compulsory licensing, so that is, right, that's indicative of maybe the other countries we're dealing with are moving towards patent rights or away from it, whatever, right? But the argument that they are talking about is that, look, it's the United States which is like putting on these IPs. So that means they definitely have uniqueness then for this argument, so at least one risk of the disad flows their way. However, I will give props to everybody in this room for probably one of the best theory debates I've ever seen on this particular counterclaims. This is the exact theory that needs to be read on the affirmative and on the negative, right? I think one on the negative, I think an argument that you all need to leverage maybe a little bit more is that without plan-inclusive counterplans, we don't get a counterplan, right? You maybe make that argument, but you can make it a little bit better, right? It's like, this is the only world. Nobody else can do it. We don't get an alt agent, so we get delay or veto Cheeto or something like that, right? So in the world of our interpretation, when you have a plan-inclusive counterplan, that's better. And I think also, I think that there needs to be a little bit more out of the MG that states that I think that I have the predictability, but you need to state that, look, like, it's not just predictability of like an infinite number of things to pick out of. It's like we are set, there is no parametrization. So maybe in this instance you don't read parametrization in your framework, right? Because your argument is you have one thing to defend. You have 30 minutes to defend this one thing, and they have 30 minutes to find 1,000 things wrong with it and pick the one, right? So there's that argument. In one more argument, I think, for the negative that can be said, I think you're letting them get away a little bit with this black markets. I think there's one more way to even make black markets more offensive for you, is that black market quality goes down. There's no regulation. So even if they get those generic drugs, right, they die or it's less effective. So if you say they increase black markets or they can get them because of black markets, you're like, that's the problem, right? There's no like for-profit institute that's regulated by the government making these generics, so there's a possibility of bad drugs getting into the market. It's only in a world of strong IP do black markets exist, and therefore the quality goes down because they just want to sell the amount. I mean, think of it even like, like weed, right? Like, weed is more regulated now, especially in Colorado and Washington, and you're not getting it laced with formaldehyde and meth. Right, like, so you have those sorts of arguments. I mean, hopefully not, but so either way, I really like this debate round. I really hate sometimes picking winners in these, but you all made me very, very happy with this debate round. So go forth and conquer.
Thank you.